passion for the game, and we spoke to Chris Close and his passion. But when it comes state of origin time now, what is the Queensland cry? It's always Queenslander, and the man synonymous with it, Billy Moore. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm great. What a fantastic night. Great night to remember the game of rugby league, isn't it?
It certainly is. Mate, the Queenslander chant, where did that start from?
Well, it was well before my time. I think it was a state of origin game in Sydney, might have been 1988, 89. Queensland were decimated by injuries. I think it's a game, I think Alf and
Bobby's leg and Bobby Linder, yeah.
Broke his leg. So they had no subs and they've come in at half time. And so the story goes, I think it was Gary Belcher and Fatty basically, being the smarter men in the team, realised that they needed something to inspire the team, and they decided that because they had no subs, at some stage they're going to have backs to the wall. They said, when we say Queenslander, it means to find that bit extra, that bit extra effort. And it was the game where Wally, remember, he ran about 30 metres out, basically scored the try, jumped up, and that was the game. And anyway, they won that match. Fantastic effort. And basically from there, just rolled on year after year, was passed down to the new players in the team. I come across it in '92, the late, great Peter Jackson. He was my roomie, first year in, and he told me the story about the Queenslander and what it meant to him. And you wouldn't find someone more passionate about Queensland. Jacko, he loved it. So he was my first roomie, and he's the one who indoctrinated me into the Queenslander call. And mate, well, the rest is history, because I certainly believed it, preached it, and always will.
You didn't invent it, but you're the one Billy made it famous.
Yeah, you're right. I suppose I was the one that let the cat out of the bag, because in '95, first game when it became public, was the first time there was a camera in the tunnel. Oh, yeah. So I didn't know the camera was there. If the camera was there, would I have still said it? Well, I actually hardly remember the incident. I was that psyched up, as you saw. So it was revealed because the camera was in the tunnel for the first time, and that's what let it out to the public. But it had been going for nearly 10 years before that.
Billy, of course, today you're so vitally involved with the game of rugby league, boss at the Sunshine Coast, and hopefully in the not too far distant future, it's going to be a Sunshine Coast side in the Queensland Cup.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to get a Queensland Cup side out of there next year. I think the Sunshine Coast lends itself to being strategically important. There's 300,000 people there. It's one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing area in Australia. Very competitive sport marketplace, and I think the QRL to stitch that area up needs to have a Q Cup presence. And let's wind the clock forward another 10 years. There's rumours abounding that there will be a fourth team coming into Queensland, and there's not too many available areas to put it. And 10 years from now there'll be 450,000 on the Sunshine Coast. I think that, if it can support a Q Cup side for a decade, would lend itself nicely for the Sunshine Coast Bears, maybe. You never know.
The Bears might eventually win, you think? Might be a long time in coming, but they might get there.
Yeah, we're tragic Bears. We'll take it any time we can, mate.
Good on you, Billy. Great to see you, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Billy Moore.
Yeah, it was interesting to be there and watch just how it all unfolded. I'm sure that not many of the guys out there playing the game would fully understand, what auspicious beginnings we had, but it was wonderful to see it reenacted, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
Mate, in the 100 years of Queensland Rugby League, I think if people said, who's the most passionate player for Queensland you've seen? If Choppy Close isn't at the top of the list, he's very close to it.
Oh, well, I like to think I gave it all, and everything that I had every time I played for Queensland, and I enjoyed that part of it, and I had some wonderful memories to take away from my time at the game. But I'm still enjoying the game now, mate, and I enjoyed the game well before I played. I think that passion is something that nobody's got a mortgage on, and obviously Queensland, has built its whole history and tradition on passion, and as long as they continue to do that, the game's in great hands here in the Sunshine State.
Choppy, I know it is a team game and you don't look for personal glories, but it is a great credit to you that in the first two State of Origin games, 1980 and 1981, when it was one game each year, the man of the match in both won Chris Close.
Yeah, well, that's something that I'll eternally be proud of, and it's something that I look back on, and I know the effort that went into that, and I certainly don't relinquish the fact that I gained that honour. But I do say this in honour to my great mate and possibly the greatest rugby league player as far as forwards go in the game, Arthur Beats, and I thought he was a tad unlucky not to be granted that honour in the first game. But I'm not giving it to him now, and he was the inspiration. He laid the catalyst, and I think the absolute infrastructure on how we played and the inspiration that he provided us through his efforts at 35 years of age will go down as one of sporting's greatest moments in Queensland. So I think it was wonderful.
Great to see you, mate.
Thanks, John.
Time to rugby league, made 2 kangaroo tours.
Yes.
Probably should have made 3, apart from injury. But
Old age, you got
old age, was
yes,
it?
Yes, yes.
Des McGovern. And then, of course, been a commentator for more years we care to remember, Des.
I shall say that, and we start again tomorrow. We're still going. But it's given me a lot of enjoyment, John, as you know yourself, and you enjoy doing those things and keeping up with the game as the years go on. As we all know, it's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It certainly has. Des, when you reflect, you look at the game today and you're still so closely involved with it as a commentator, and you think back to your playing days, would you like to be playing the game today?
Yes, for the money's sake I would. Because you can remember back those days when we were playing, we paid for nothing. But we enjoyed it, and that was the main thing those days. But the game has changed, the style of the game has changed, the rules have changed, and you've got to try and keep up with it, haven't you, when you're doing commentary and that.
You certainly have. Des, when you look at those kangaroo sides that you toured with, some of the great names in Australian Rugby League that you played with and, of course, played against.
Yes, I was very fortunate to play with some of the best that have ever played. You know, when you look at Churchill and those fellas, Duncan Hall and Mick Crocker, those fellas, they were just outstanding players, mate, weren't they? They made the game. And
who do you regard as the best player you played with or against, Des?
Well, I always think Bobby Banks is a very good pilot, mate. But as we've seen, Wally Lewis after that, he's probably taken over the role. But I had great admiration for Bob and Duncan Hall too. And Harry Wells, he was one of the fellas that I did like. And he combined with Gasnier. I didn't have the opportunity to play with Reggie Gasnier, but I saw him play with Harry, and they were outstanding players, I thought.
It's interesting you say Bob Banks. I used to, as a kid, love watching Bobby Banks play, and I even said to Bob when we were interviewing him tonight, I would have loved to have seen the footage of the try he scored on that 56 tour at Bradford, because in all of the write-ups of the game, even at this day, they regard it as one of the greatest individual tries that they've ever seen in Test football.
Yes, for sure too, mate. Yes, it was a great one, all right. But when you go over the years, John, there's been lots of great players, hasn't it? And it's just hard to single one or two out. But it was a pleasure to play with those fellas, and like Cyril Conlon and Keithy Holman, one of the Frankie Stanmore those days, and like Dennis Flannery, they were all top players. And we're all getting on now, but there's still quite a few of them around, and you enjoy having a yarn with them and going back, reflecting on what was on. And I keep thinking of the change of the rules, in particular with the scrums. As you know, John, when you went back to when we were playing, the scrum was a very important part of the game. And if you didn't have a good hook or a good half-back, well, you didn't win much of the ball.
No, you did not.
And that was how the things changed. And sometimes it's for the better, I suppose. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But it gives me great pleasure still to be associated with the game.
Des, thanks for everything you've done for the game, and good luck for this year in the Toowoomba competition, starting again this weekend.
Yes, thank you, John.
And forwards from country Queensland, Jimmy Patterson, Brian Fitzsimmons. Jim, terrific to see you here today. And I think when people talk about the great back rowers for Queensland, the name Jim Patterson is still right up at the very top. You must have some proud moments, proud memories when you look back tonight.
I do, yeah. It's been I've had a good career, and I'm very pleased. I stayed in North Queensland for it.
I was going to ask you that, Jim. You know, when the money was around in those days for players to come to Brisbane or go to Sydney, Jim Patterson always stayed in Townsville.
Yes, I was getting more money than some of the players in Sydney, so I stayed there.
When you look back on your memories, first of all, of Queensland games, anyone that stands out in particular, Jim?
I think the Kurumara Championship game when we were playing Brisbane, the first time we played Brisbane, we beat them, and it was a very big thrill for all of us, you know.
Well, it was, and Brian, you'd be one of those that would know, in those days, the country championships, the Queensland championships, they were always a big thing to beat Brisbane.
John, the old bloke here beside me, and I will say it, and there's one thing he did push into us. We're going down this win, we're going to beat these bastards. You're right, and we did. And it was about 3 or 4 years, Pato, and we had the run of them. And it's a great thing.
Well, Brian and Jim, I suppose nothing's changed. They used to say in those days that Queensland was strong when North Queensland was strong, and the same applies today, doesn't it?
It is definitely the way it is. and what they've got, the talent they've got still in North Queensland today. They haven't seen it yet, I don't think. And I don't know what you think about it, Pato, but I think today the kids that they've around the place can do anything if it goes through the same system what we did.
Yeah, I believe it will, Brian. Yeah.
Great to see you fellas, and enjoy the rest of the night.
Thanks, John.
Good to see you. Brian Fitzsimmons, and Queensland, Australian player, Kangaroo and chairman of the QRL. Must give you great satisfaction and great pleasure tonight.
Well, it certainly has, John. I think the big thing with it is that people have been able to reflect the different parts of the game in their own lives. And, of course, the reenactment was well done, but the photos and the stories that have unfolded here tonight have just been outstanding.
I mean, in the 100 years seems a long time, but in the space of history, it's very small. But, gee, hasn't a lot happened in that 100 years for this great game?
Well, it certainly has, and even just when you pause to see the rule changes that have happened, certainly didn't change for a long period of time, but then in the 60s when we had the change in distance of the rucks and the replacement rules changed, and certainly it had a lot to do with it. But the game itself, with the camaraderie of the players and the fierce competition that exists, still exists today. And when one looks back, you've had some very heavy battles on the football field, but great mates afterwards. And I played with some great players, and they're great mates of mine today.
John, there is no doubt that in the centenary of rugby league, one of the greatest things to happen was the introduction of State of Origin, for which I suppose a lot of people tend to forget you had such an important part as the Queensland coach for that very first game. Did you ever envisage back then how big this was going to be?
Well, obviously that day was a very important one for Queensland. I'd had the pleasure of playing in winning teams for Queensland, and there was nothing more fulfilling to do that, and playing for New South Wales, beating Queensland. But on that night, it was a do-or-die effort for us. We knew New South Wales would come up and would just treat it as a little bit of a joke, and so we left no stone unturned, and the players were ready to play, and some hadn't represented Queensland, and Arthur Beetson fell into that category, but the other players there. But we had a pretty smart side when you had a look at it, but with Wally Lewis and Chris Close, Mal Meninga, and the forward pack consisting of Rod Morris, Arthur Beetson and Johnny Lang and Rocket Reddy and Rowan Hancock, and of course Wally Lewis was the lock forward.
And Rod Reddy, that was the only game he ever did play for Queensland.
He did, and he played a superb game.
Yeah.
He was a great player. And of course, Greg Oliphant as the halfback, who was really a fierce competitor, and Alan Smith as the 5'8", which people didn't realise as one of the players that was outstanding. But that was an important game for Queensland, and the players rose to the occasion. Of course, then it's history now, what happens, and the wonderful events that happen. And we always say that each game is an event. I know it's important to win the series, but each game itself is an event in its own right.
Cracker, I've never asked you this, but you mentioned the fact you did play for New South Wales when you were playing down at Manly. You're a true blue Queenslander. Was there the same feeling about winning an interstate game when you had a blue jersey on as when the Maroons win?
When you go out to play as a professional, for the want of a better term, obviously there's a little bit at stake, and that's your own reputation. Yeah. So you have to perform well anyway, and it's if you don't play well, you feel dissatisfied in your own performance. But yes, New South Wales was different to play for. Playing for New South Wales was different to playing for Queensland.
No wonder you're such a good administrator. You're very diplomatic, Cracker.
No, it was a great career, and I enjoyed it. It was great to catch up with the guys here tonight and reminisce a few of the wonderful moments of rugby league.
Well done. It's been a great night.
Cheers.
Players, and then became an outstanding administrator in the game, Kenny McCaffrey. Ken, must be a proud moment tonight when you look back on the history of this game.
Oh, it is. To think that you played a part in it as well. It's very interesting. I think a lot of people forget as the years go by the efforts that are put into serving the game in the way that was portrayed tonight. I thought it was very touching, very artistic, and it is doubly rewarding having been a player and an administrator, and just know that you go through the same sort of problems and get over the top of them and see the game develop to the standard that it is today. It's a lovely story.
It is a lovely story. Of course, if it had been State of Origin in your day,
Yes.
Allegiances then would have been?
Well, as long as the game was played in the right way and played in an entertaining way, winning and losing is an important thing. But the thing is what you provide by way of entertainment and the way you conduct yourself.
Well, it is a great game, and it's a very special day today, and great to see you here, Kenny, as always.
Thank you.
A really proud night for Queensland, and I guess for you personally, as the current coach of the State of Origin side, it is a proud night to reflect on what's happened in the last 100 years.
Oh, man, as the philosophy of the Origin side, man, it's good to reflect on the past and what those people have done prior to you to actually make the game what it is today. It was fantastic, and for me, from a historical point of view, it's just good to actually have a really good basic understanding of how the game actually started and the people that put their fortunes on the line and their reputations on the line initially. I think it was it makes you feel pretty proud that we're carrying on that same that same nature.
I guess when State of Origin is such a great thing in Australia, but it's such a magnificent thing for Queensland, it is interesting that very first meeting, one of the things they spoke about was making sure that there were representative games.
Representative games is important to the nature of the game, really. I mean, that sort of extinguishes between different codes certainly here in Australia, and the rivalry between New South Wales and Queensland Rugby League is probably the pinnacle of any rivalry you get in Australia.
And long may it continue, and long may the Cane Toads be on top, particularly in centenary year.
Well, another 100 years, please go the Maroons, that's for sure.
Good on you, mate. Good to see you.
Thanks, John.
Would you welcome Bob Banks? Bob Banks, Wally Lewis. Well, I don't know if like me, but when I was growing up, this fella was just one of my absolute heroes. Had you met Bobby before today?
No, it's the first time, but one of the best parts, I suppose, about meeting is understanding, the history of rugby league and the people that helped create that history, and it's fellows like Banksy that certainly managed to do that. We got off on a very good note though. Banksy asked me what weight I played at and what it was all about, and I got to find out that I was the fattest 5'8" to play for Queensland. So it's all gone down very well.
Bobby, great to see you. You were a much travelled player because you came originally down from, I think down in around the Highlands around Tumut way you were born, but you moved around a bit, and even in Queensland.
That's so right. I moved from north and west there.
From Newcastle up to Queensland. What brought you to Queensland originally?
Well, Charters Towers had an advertisement in the paper and I answered it. And it sounded all right to me, so I got a couple of blokes together and we went to Charters Towers. We didn't win the Foley Shield. I loved Queensland so much that I thought, well, I'll stop here, I think.
And these days, where do you live now?
Back in Newcastle.
In Newcastle. Well, I've got to say, there have been some great tries that have been scored for Australia, as you well know, and you've been involved in many of them. But I always just wish there had been the television coverage in those days that there is today, because still talked about, when you read the annals of rugby league, they'll all say one of the greatest ever tries that was ever scored in a test match between Australia and England was scored, I think it was at Odsal Stadium in Bradford on the Kangaroo Tour. Bobby, in 56? And you were the fella who scored it. You're probably too modest to tell us, but basically, what happened?
Oh my God. Well, there was a scrum on the halfway mark. And it was a terrible pass run. It was a wet day, and I picked it up and I ran through it underneath the post, which was unusual for me because I never scored any tries.
Well, actually, Bob is being very modest, because the story of it is he did pick up that ball at his feet in the wet, then chip-kicked, regathered and sidestepped about 3 or 4 blokes before he then ran away and scored under the post. And the Poms still say to this day, it is one of the best tries we've ever seen. But we knew what a genius he was as a player. Bob, you're going to go to the game tonight between the Bronx and North Queensland. This will be your first visit, will it, to Suncorp Stadium?
Since I played there,
Fantastic. Lang Park in those days. Mate, it is great to have you back, because he was one of the greatest 5'8", along with perhaps the greatest of them all. Would you please thank Bob Banks, terrific to see him, and Wally Lewis.